your Chargers linebacker, Dan Henley, and you're tuning in with Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dale Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, AG1, Aura, Mint Mobile, and Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia. If this is your first time tuning into the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. Dan Wolkenstein and everybody joining in the chat room. Happy holidays to everybody. It is time for the Chargers Unleashed holiday special live Q&A. I know we have the Chargers-Bills game taking place later on this afternoon. But Dan, as I have said at this point in time, no disrespect to where we are at in the season and the team as it stands right now, but with all the turmoil that has taken place over the past several weeks with the Chargers, the game and certain aspects of it have just kind of taken a back seat to 2024, the future, the GM, the head coaching search, and a whole variety of other things. So given it's the holiday spirit, and I know a lot of people have a lot of questions that they still want to get off their shoulders, especially even after the live show that we had after the Oakland or the Las Vegas Raiders game. Let's have another roundtable of just open-ended conversations, answering a bunch of your guys' questions. Looking forward to get into it. Also have a special announcement here that we'll be talking about very shortly. But Dan Wolkenstein, how are you, sir?
Jake Hefner, I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm very much looking forward to this pivotal matchup tonight on Peacock.
Huge.
I'm still debating if I want to pay the $11.99 because I just don't know if it's going to be something that's worth $11.99, other than the fact that the Chargers will be playing a game, which that's what matters, I guess. A game will be played tonight. But you're right. Big day for Chargers Unleashed. We have some I don't want to say breaking news, but some announcements, exciting stuff going on for 2024 that we're excited to bring on for Chargers fans. But you said it, Jake. This is a live show for folks in the comments in the chat. Like, these are run by you. So any questions, comments, topics, things you'd like us to discuss, things you like or dislike, we're all about it. So we'll be kind of going through that and interweaving those topics and themes throughout the episode, as well as talk about some GM head coaching discussions. We'll talk about the SJD info from yesterday. But Jake, I think let's kind of start off the front. I think you and I, we've been doing this now. How long has it been? What, 4 years? Is this 4 years? Jeez.
It's been a minute.
4 years. And we have tried our best to be ourselves, to stay true to who we are. We've tried our best to bring things authentically and stand on what we say. And so far, thanks to all the viewers and listeners and all the support, we've grown a little bit, just this little podcast over here. But as things progress here with Chargers Unleashed and LAFB Network, always looking to find new voices, new personalities, new ways for us to bring in content for Chargers fans in an effort to kind of expand what we do and what Chargers fans can learn about this team. So with that, I think the announcement first we want to bring in is we actually are going to be bringing on someone else to join the Chargers Unleashed banner. And things are not changing here with Chargers Unleashed. Jake and I will obviously be doing the same thing, but we'll be doing it better as we try to always improve. But we'll be bringing additional content. So, Jake, I think it's time. Without further ado, I say we bring in the newest member to Chargers Unleashed, which will bring into exactly how this will all work and all that jazz. But until then, let's bring in Jason for his quick little intro about himself, talk about why he's here, what he's looking to do, and I'll move him into the right screen. But Jason Baler, welcome to Chargers Unleashed, officially live. Give the viewers and listeners a little sneak peek at who you are and why you're here.
All right, so a few of you may know me. I've lurked around on Twitter for a while now, or X. It's one of them.
We call it Twitter, Jason. Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, it'll always be Twitter. It's iconic Twitter. You may have seen me in previous podcasts before. It's going to be more of the same if you have seen me there. If not, look, I just like to talk football. I like talking X's and O's. I like the discussions, and I'm just bringing more of that to the table. That's really it. I know we have some plans on bringing those X's and O's here, and I'm super excited to share one with you soon. Just going to be lots of Keenan Allen and Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's your only sneak peek into that one. But I do need a new camera for Christmas. He's right.
You know what? At least out of the three of us, for this being the holiday special Q&A, Jason's the only one that is remotely festive out of the three of us.
Yeah, Jason's virtual background is much better than ours.
Yeah, that is the winner.
Actual background.
That's right.
Yeah, so look, there's no show like a live show where you get flamed by your camera within 30 seconds of joining. That's what these are about. So we're all about the hot takes, like camera crew. I think before we get into kind of the Q&A, I'm excited about this. So Jason's joining Chargers Unleashed. Again, Jason will be adding additional content. So we're actually going to be having a new show underneath the Chargers Unleashed and LA Football banner that Jason will be managing and owning. He will be bringing on guests. He'll be kind of going through some more of the X's and O's, like Jason said. That's kind of his strong suit. And so as much as Jake and I like to be masters of everything, I like to consider myself a jack of all trades, ace of none. I bring in aces who can do things that they do well to help me with things that I don't. So
I'm definitely not a master of anything at all whatsoever. Unless it's movie quotes.
Yes.
I'm down to challenge on that, but I'm a master of nothing.
And honestly, so Alan comes in with the comments. Jason's going to be the moderate to reel in Dan's optimism and Jake's pessimism. And as we were thinking about this,
it's always nice to find middle ground.
Hence why Jason is right in the middle between us. This is exactly how it's going to work, most likely.
It's already happened, Alan. It's already happened.
Oh, yeah. You should have heard last night's conversation. So real quick, let's kind of give a quick preview of what we're going to have in store here with this new show for Jason and company. And then we'll kind of get into all of the Q&A and kind of go into all of the things, that questions and comments and topics that people have. But first off, here is a quick preview of what Jason's going to be doing. So Jason, that's your show.
That's me.
Blueprints. Talk about X's and O's. Jason will be kind of going through specific scheme topics, player topics, personnel topics, things that are happening on the field that can get better or could get worse, or
and
things
a lot of
to
Blue's Clues jokes.
There we go. There we go.
Oh, that's what.
That's really what I'll be tuning in for.
That's what we're here for. Okay, so let's get into some of these topics. Jason, I'll let you do the honors for answering the first one. Kapil asks, do you guys think the SJD move was a message to the players that this isn't just a coaching front office overhaul, but a personnel one as well?
I'm sure that is going to be the case, but I don't think you do that in December if you're trying to send that message now when players are still on the roster, especially these veterans that are kind of on the fence that still need to play for you. But I think more what it comes down to is I think a lot of people were pointing out comments by SJD after the Broncos game in response to the Russell Wilson touchdown where he had all day to throw. I don't know if it's that. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't have enough information on that to answer that. But I wouldn't be surprised if SJD asked. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a conversation they had like, hey, we're probably going to let you go this season. What do you want to do? But I can't imagine they would send a statement like that in December, but they did just fire everybody. So like maybe.
Yeah. Jake, were you surprised by not necessarily the timing, but were you surprised that SJD was cut at all? Like, even if you fast forward to 2024, did you see that coming?
I mean, 2024, he was a candidate to be released from a salary cap salvaging purpose, considering what the Chargers are going to walk into on 2024 as it relates to their salary cap. There's a lot of red that needs to be cleared out. And he's been a candidate that, given the circumstances of this year, was a candidate to get released. And now what? You're saving $7.5 million for the cap next year going in. I just thought yes, the timing still a day before the game was very interesting. And if this was all about from a standpoint of forward thinking and whatever JoJo Wooden was trying to piece together as far as what could be done for this team next year, and obviously having enough respect for SJD to give him an opportunity to go play for a contending team as it stands right now. There's a lot of variables in this move. I don't necessarily like Jason said, I don't think that you do this type of a move to send a message when you're talking about an interim head coach who has been with this organization for a very long time, JoJo Wooden, who's been part of this front office during the same duration as Tom Telesco has. I'm not so sure that that's the case. I think that this was merely from a standpoint of financials, looking at the big picture and trying to set your team up for whatever success that you could possibly have in 2024. And again, I think the bigger surprise here was just the timing of it. But outside of that, I don't think there was any underlying message behind it.
Yeah, honestly, Kevin Kernick with the comments, nothing to look into. It's just business. I think it's mostly business. I think at the end of the day, I don't think it matters this year when anybody's cut. And at this point, I don't think SJD's presence on this team is going to mean a win or a loss. And if you're going to cut him, give him a chance to go to a contender. I'm sure there was some conversation about it. And yeah, he's not winning on this team. We know that. So that saves roughly $7.5 million for the cap next year. So I think they're at $37.5 million over the cap now versus 45. So that helps. But honestly, when it happened, I don't think the only surprise was when it happened, but that also didn't matter because do you really think that SJD is going to make a difference at this point? I'm not trying to say to be rude. I'm just saying literally what. That hasn't been the reason the team has won or lost for the most part all season. So let him go win. There was and Alan does say he was a captain too. That's the part, again, the timing of it is interesting. Literally, I speak from experience, season ticket holder. We just got season ticket gifts. And on one of the gifts was a video from SJD thanking the fans. And the next day he's waived. So I don't know. I don't really think it matters. Someone in the comments here is talking about a possible head coaching candidate and wants to wish a happy birthday to Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh, now 60 years old. We haven't talked about this together collectively, but Jake, you and I, we're going to be doing the head coaching candidate episode probably next week. But as it stands right now, is there any head coaching candidate that is above Jim Harbaugh for any of us?
No.
I agree.
Mm-mm.
I feel like that needs to be said again, just to make sure that everybody fully understands where the ranking is. There will be no coaches that are rated higher than Jim Harbaugh for the Chargers. Now, there will be plenty of other ones that could also be good fits for the Chargers. Spoiler alert, that's coming soon. But there will be none that are above Jim Harbaugh.
There are some that are probably out of right field. There's rumors about a Mike Tomlin thing, possibly Vrabel, which I don't see happening. I think both franchises would be stupid to let their head coaches go. They could go up the boards, but are they going to go above Jim Harbaugh? No, in my opinion. I don't think it matters. I think it's
close.
Agreed. I think Tomlin would be in top 3 for me. But I think it's Jim Harbaugh, and it just makes sense, man, that there's so many connections there, and the things that Chargers need, he has. Chargers have lacked, he has. It just makes too much sense. And I do kind of like the idea. There are some questions and concerns about Jim Harbaugh and does he play well in the sandbox, basically? And there's been talks, and I've had questions about how things went in San Francisco and kind of how feathers are ruffled, if you will. But in this specific scenario with this franchise, ruffle all the feathers. That's what I think this team needs. So let it rip. Let it rip.
Who was his GM in San Francisco?
Ooh, good question. Jake, do you know who his GM was in San Francisco?
And
was it York?
During Harbaugh's? Because it wasn't bulky. I can't actually honestly remember. I totally completely forgotten during that regime
for some reason York is popping into my. I don't know if he was there.
I don't know.
And I also don't know if Harbaugh brought him in. Is the big thing. I think if you hire Harbaugh,
comments
hire him first.
Yeah, it's funny. Comments both in there where it's It was both. Some people
Bulky
were saying
and
York
York.
and bulky. Yeah, so I was like, I thought it was between both of those, but I couldn't remember. All I know is that bulky lasted until 2017 when Lynch came in.
So York is the owner and bulky was the GM.
Thank you. Okay.
Next question. Thomas Costello comes in front of the show. Thomas, happy holidays to you and your family. Who do you most want to see getting playing time these last 3 games?
It's easy.
Floor is yours.
Go ahead.
It's Deion Henley, like by far.
There's
a chance that the Chargers don't have both of their starting linebackers next season. I would say a very, very high chance. Like it's almost going to happen. Like
no
there's not much
K9,
debate
no
there.
Eric Kendricks. Yep.
Right. And he hasn't played. And you think about that going into year 2. That means going into the draft, you have no idea if the linebacker you drafted the year before is ready to go. You can say you looked at him in practice, that's fine, but you didn't look at him in a game. You looked at him in special teams, but that's not what you're going to play him at. And so you're talking about your top linebacker next year that is currently on the roster. I mean, I guess technically it's Nick Niemann.
Niemann?
Yeah. Like, so you are now, because you don't know what you're getting, linebacker is back in your needs in the draft. It's right there, or it's right up there again because you don't know what you have. You can assume Deion Henley is going to be good, and you can just say, no, we're not drafting a linebacker because Henley's going to be good, but you don't know. And then you go into next season and Henley is just lost and terrible. Well, now guess what? You didn't fill a need. Whereas if you got to look at him this year, at least in some cases, in some circumstances, you would at least know, like, okay, he's ready. Okay, he's not going to work out. Linebacker needs to be a draft need again or a free agent need. And now you don't have that clarity because he hasn't played. So I think it's very clearly got to be Deion Henley.
Dan, this just goes into, again, because the root of all of this, not necessarily given where the team is at now, 3 games left to play, who obviously we would want to see during these last 3 games. But there's so many question marks on some of these guys that we could go through right now, whether it's Deion, whether it's Isaiah Spiller, whether it's a whole slew of other guys, Darius Davis infused in this offense. This is a product of how you draft poorly for an NFL team for 11 years. This is your result.
But like within this specific scenario, I don't know if it's bad drafting. I think it's just bad roster management. Like you're not putting him on the field.
Part of it. That's still part of it. Yes. I mean, in certain circumstances, offensively, defensively, player development, coaching, yes. From the standpoint that it took this long just for Isaiah Spiller to even get on the active roster this year is still beyond me, considering how little you played him last year. Deion Henley, who we all knew when he was taken in the 3rd round, that his immediate contributions were going to be on special teams. I still don't fully understand how you could not infuse him into this lineup and this defense sooner when the struggles have been happening all year. I go back to that as far as when you chose to make changes on this roster. I felt like it was at the last straw when this team finally hit rock bottom, and sometimes when you didn't have a choice, when you could have started doing this earlier in the year and possibly have yielded better results. So, yeah, there's a slew of players that you would like to see more of.
Yeah, I think
over these next 3 weeks.
I think Deion's up there for sure. I can't think of one who's more needing playing time, but there's a comment here from Joseph DiMartini. I'd like to see Darius Davis get some more offensive snaps these last 3 weeks. Why he has not been used as an offensive weapon other than 2 jet sweeps and a decoy all season blows my mind. Like even if he doesn't catch it, throw one 60 yards down the field, throw it way past him. I don't care. Like just make it at least an option to be used. I mean, obviously, I would love for them to actually scheme him some play designs that he can catch something, but utilize him. But then you got to go back. Like, I think Quentin Johnson is huge to get these 3 games to just pepper him. Like, give him experience, give him some opportunities to kind of work through some of the challenges, which I think he's starting to do. Hopefully, the offensive staff starts to realize, like, these young guys need confidence and need repetition. So whether it's Quentin Johnson, Isaiah Spiller, Deion Henley, McFadden on the offensive line, Hymus, like, figure out what these guys are.
Oh, Hymus now, yeah, he's definitely playing now.
Yeah, I mean, you got like center. I mean, look, you're probably not going to have Corey Linsley next year. I'm guessing he won't be back. I think he retires. JT Woods, we haven't seen anything from him. I don't even know if he's active yet.
I don't think he has been active yet.
The corners on this team next year under contract are Asante Samuel Jr., Jazir Taylor, Dean Leonard.
Woof.
That's not great. We know what Thule is. Like, that's the one guy, the one young kid that we can bank on, that we know what he is and we know he's going to get better. Otherwise, all the young guys need to go. So, yeah, I would love to see the young guys get some run today. I really would. Honestly, I think, okay, question for you guys. Lots of stuff in the media. Articles came out last few days about Brandon Staley, about the locker room being fractured, or I'm paraphrasing here, but some of the younger guys not getting the notoriety, or not getting time, or not getting
birthday wishes
and all this stuff. At the end of the day, like when decisions and when seasons go wrong and they go down and people get fired, like hit pieces like this always come out. And it's hindsight 2020. Everybody can have the things that didn't look good or things that they'll come out with. Like, none of this really surprises me. Was there anything in there that was, I think the most, I don't want to say explosive, but the most like damning part of that was seemingly seeing how impactful not only the loss in Jacksonville was, but the response to the loss in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
And how that seemed to have affected this team. And everybody reported, like, how does that not affect you? But I think it affected them more. But it's twofold for me. Like, it was, the loss is one thing. But, like, in my opinion, like, that can create a villain arc where you use that to fuel you. Or you dismiss it like, it happens all the time. And I think the latter is what occurred. And the latter is what damned this team.
I think there was a few things in there. If you're, talking about the ESPN article specifically, Dan, there was a few things in there that were really surprising. The one that jumped out to me was the alleged conversation that happened between Brandon Staley and former linebackers coach Matt Wilhoit, which when Matt Wilhoit was left go in the offseason, I know Dan and I were talking about this, how surprised we were that happened, because if you go back to last year, in terms of the guys that Matt Wilhoit had coached up, we're talking about the Kaiser White in the year that he really performed for the Chargers before he eventually left, the Drew Tranquil year, the year before he left. You thought from a standpoint of what you were going to have at that linebacker position that he was one of the coaches on the defensive side that was actually doing a pretty damn good job as far as developing talent. And now to come to find out that apparently after that Jacksonville game, the war of words that were had inside the locker room presents a completely different picture of what we had assumed had taken place. And whether this was known at that point in time or not, when Brandon Staley had met with the ownership after the Jacksonville loss, if that was common knowledge or not, no idea what took place. But Dan, we've been talking about this for several weeks. At least I know I have. And just having this idea that there is disconnect in this locker room, and there has been for several weeks. And it's from the standpoint of these are issues that the Chargers have had for consecutive weeks. Whether it's offensively or defensively, this team was never able to put together one single game of complimentary football for 4 quarters. Never felt like that. You have one day where the offense is up, the defense is terrible. Another week, the defense picks you up, the offense just can't get it going. And ultimately, when your signature win for quarterback to quarterback is a win over Kirk Cousins, and the rest of your wins are against backup quarterbacks, Justin Herbert ending the 2023 season with literally no viable standout wins under his belt, that's extremely disappointing. Extremely disappointing. And what this shows is that there was a lot more than what anybody knew or believed or anything like that. And yes, this is not just a Brandon Staley issue that I'm talking about, because it does go higher to this in terms of personnel that's on this team and what this team was set up for. And now you're 5 years into Justin Herbert's contract, and essentially a little mini rebuild has to happen in order for you to get back into good playoff contention, because now the rookie contract is virtually done with. Now you have to find more creative ways on how to build this roster. And it's unfortunate from the standpoint of what we had been presented, what we all believed, that behind the scenes it was a completely different story. And it's unfortunate when you know it's taking place with guys that we considered leaders of this team, and the discourse that was happening between player, not just player coach, but player. Like that's not a team. That doesn't function.
Jason, were you surprised?
No. Look, I feel like when we all watched that Jacksonville game, I feel like everybody had a pretty much set in their minds that if it wasn't set, it was at least there of like, am I gonna wake up and Staley's gone?
100%.
Not just because of the comeback, and I'm gonna relive this game as little as possible right now. But because of, I think it was maybe it was Daniel Popper's article that pointed it out, but when Joey Bosa slammed his helmet and walked to the sideline, and Brandon Staley just picked it up and gave it back. I don't know if that was that Daniel Popper's article that said that, or was it?
I mean, there were a lot of articles that talked about that, to be honest.
Yeah, I may be thinking of the wrong article. There was like 5 that came out about Staley's tenure. So, someone did though, and said like at that moment you saw a lot of people. Oh no, it wasn't Daniel Popper. It was Money Smith. That was talking about it, and said that at the moment that he gave the helmet back to Joey Bosa, it was like, ugh, like that's not a head coach thing to do. You know, you need somebody, and I believe he was talking about it in the context of you need somebody who can go and pull the guy's jersey and get in his face and say like, hey, pick up your helmet and get back in the game, or go sit down. You know, like one of those deals. And I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's what you're looking for. I don't know if that's what they need, but I do know like that if your players feel okay around you throwing a tantrum like that, and I'm not going to say it was like a childish tantrum, but it was maybe a little bit, but it was a moment where your team captain, I don't know if he was captain at that point, but or one of your team leaders, somebody who's supposed to lead by example, has lost his cool and has lost his focus. And now your young guys are looking at him, or your depth pieces are looking at him, and like, yeah, man, this game sucks. These refs suck.
And honestly, like the thing about it was like when a player loses their cool, and this is like head coaching 101, and I'm not a head coach, but like if a player loses their cool and you need that player to like be in the zone and still lock in for the next play or lock in throughout the game, when they lose their cool, you don't just let them kind of wander off into the sunset with their cool lost. Like you got to hone it back in. Like you got to channel that somehow.
Like, hey, where'd Bosa go? He's up there somewhere.
Yeah, like I think that's there hasn't, like people say accountability, but there hasn't been like the directness of like find a problem, fix the problem, find a problem, fix the problem. It's just like problem exists and then just kind of wait it out, at least seemingly optics wise.
I'd say like the secondary is the one spot we've seen like them try to find solutions.
Totally. I agree.
And even then it was like super dysfunctional, and like a super dysfunctional search.
To say the least. Yes.
So like I feel like that problem solving was there, but at the same time it was very they were very obviously like favorites on the team, I guess I'll say. Where even if that player played as poorly as you can play, they were right back. And it's like, okay, well,
you believe in them as a player. You believe in them like the history says they're going to be better. And you're like, well, that game was not an example of that. So
Right. And I think a great example of that was how they've handled the linebacker room. We're talking about Deion Henley not getting on the field, but when you look at how they've handled the linebacker room, it's very much you're going to get as you guys are like the standard here in this defense. You guys are the stars in the middle of this defense. So from this point on, you guys are kind of like you guys are put in there. We're leaving you there, and you're our trying to think of a good linebacker combo in the NFL. You're our Fred Warner and Greenlaw, and that's not. Listen, Kenneth Murray's a great dude, all right, but
he's been better this year than he has in years past.
Yeah, and he's had some solid games this year. He's had games this year where you look at him and you're like, all right, that guy can be a starting linebacker in the NFL, which is cool. But if you're not a consistent room, that means what you do is you go and you take a step back and you look at any room. We'll set this as any room where if you have guys that show that potential, but they have some inconsistencies. What you do is you take a step back and you say, all right, what is this player good at? What is player B good at? What is player C good at? You're like, all right, well, this situation calls for player C to get a rep because of this scenario popping up. So what you do is you minimize the things that those inconsistent players are bad at, where those inconsistencies come to light, and you start subbing guys in, and you start rotating, and you start seeing proactive coaching in a real game plan, in a shifting game plan, a dynamic game plan, where you're putting players where they are comfortable and you're putting players in a position to succeed. And I think if you saw that more and you saw less just put them in and leave them there type players, like it's fantasy football, like you're throwing Keenan Allen on the field, or throwing Travis Kelce on the field, or I feel like if you saw that more dynamic, proactive like rotation to really limit these inconsistencies. For example, on passing downs, I feel like we should have saw more Deion Henley in these downs where you need a little more athleticism in there. If you need a little more awareness on these 3rd and 20s, yeah, maybe Deion Henley's not aware enough yet. Maybe he's still a little too raw to throw in there. Or maybe if you have a pass rush situation, that's where you want Kenneth Murray, is like in some blitz packages there, which they did not do nearly enough. So yeah, I just wish for all the positions altogether, corners, everything, I wish there was more. This is what this player's good at. Let's get him in there in those moments.
Yeah. Jake is out for a few minutes. He'll be back here probably like in 5-ish. So we'll kind of try to continue on. Jason, let's keep this thing going. Harbaugh could turn the ship around fast, as Mojo44 Blues. This is and I'll kind of pivot from Brandon Staley to kind of moving forward with this. Like, I still think Brandon Staley is a good coach.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the talk here about he's the worst coach ever and he should never, like, I miss me with that stuff. Like, let's be real here for a second. He was a rookie head coach who I think was probably a little over his skis when it comes to some of the challenges of being a first-time head coach, paired with being with an organization that may not be able to lift up a first-time head coach with experience, success, and prowess, understanding of what that coach needs to do in order to be successful.
That seems fair.
I think that the head coach was probably too far in the mindset of being a defensive coordinator and took it on the chin personally that he had to fix it. When as a head coach, I think sometimes you have to be able to delegate and trust the guys you have around you, and you can focus on the problems at hand, macro level. But more importantly, I think there are so many lessons that you learn as a first-time head coach, and you can't learn those lessons until you go through them. And I don't know if it was a matter of him not having the confidence to speak up, him not having the wherewithal to recognize, like, sometimes public scrutiny of players or of yourself, or sometimes like more self-awareness, or sometimes, banging your hand against the table and finding a way to actually fix this and forcing the issue. I think sometimes he was kind of playing his part as a head coach and wasn't trying to kind of pave his own road for the betterment of the team. And clearly, I thought Brandon Staley was the right solution for this team, and that was wrong. Obviously, looking at the results, it's a results-based business. He was not what the Chargers needed. That does not mean that he was a bad coach, but he was not the right coach for this team. And I could live with that. I guarantee you he is going to be the NFL next year. And I guarantee you at some point he's probably, I shouldn't say guarantee. I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes a head coaching candidate in a few years again. Okay, I think he got some chops. He learned some lessons. But it's clear that he was not the right coach for the team, given all that this team was going through. Now, Harbaugh turning the ship around fast. A lot of people are way down on, it's going to be a 2-3 year rebuild. This team's going nowhere in a hurry. I disagree. Like as bad as some of the cap situation looks, and as bad as some of the personnel and the coaching and management and roster construction and personnel stuff has looked, I think this is a pretty pointed and pretty easy, if you do it right, rebuild. Like, you figure out the roster construction and salary cap. Like, there's going to be some tough decisions. You look at the cap numbers. I'm looking at you, Joey Bosa, Eric Kendricks, Corey Linsley's probably retiring. It's probably going to be Mike Williams is my guess. Although I think this team loves Mike Williams. But that was Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley who love Mike Williams. I don't know if the next regime will. But once you get through that, like, you got the quarterback. And that can mask so many deficiencies as long as you set up the quarterback to succeed. So I think that he could turn the ship around fast. He's an offensive guy, quarterback guy, takes no shit from anybody kind of guy. And he has succeeded in every place he's been and has turned it around every franchise he's been around. So I agree. Define fast, Jason. How fast do you think he could turn the ship around?
Dang. How fast? Listen, anytime you have a franchise quarterback, a franchise left tackle, they should have their star receiver back in Keenan Allen next year, assuming they extend him or just leave his contract be. I don't know what their plan is for him. You can go win football games. They really are a couple ball hops, like ball takes one more hop or one less hop, and they're maybe the record's flipped. It's tough. It's tough to speculate like that, but
you hear the term puck luck. Like, this is kind of equivalent in football.
And I really do think that a good coach probably flips 4 or so of those games, or prevents a couple of those blowouts from happening. I think they only have 2 games that I would classify as like a blowout this year, but that would be. I mean, they were in it for most of the Denver game, but I guess really only
the 3 bad ones were Denver, Kansas City, and obviously the Raiders game.
And I think Kansas City's made me the angriest, to be honest with you, just because Travis Kelce. Yeah, I'm not going to get into that. But that I feel like that's when you looked at the scheme and you were like, all right, there's something up here. But how fast could he turn it around? I think you have to go into it thinking you could turn it around as soon as next year because you have Justin Herbert. You really can't afford to go into this offseason with the mindset of we are rebuilding. Because if you're rebuilding, we'll say that's at least a 3-year process when you're rebuilding a team. That's usually when, you think of like the Cardinals with Kyler Murray when they go into year 3 for his MVP, or Lamar Jackson going into year 3, or, you think it's like a 3-year process when you're rebuilding. You really can't afford to, because Justin Herbert is 25. I think he's going to be 26 next season. Is that when he turns 26 next season?
I believe so, yep.
So what, we're talking 29, 30 years old by the time this rebuild is done? You can't really.
No way.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that you go into it with that mindset, because you have a franchise quarterback who is 25 years old as it stands right now. And if you're really thinking you go into it with a full rebuild like that, well, now you're talking about how many years are you going to get out of him by the time your team is rebuilt? Especially with the beating he's taken so far in his career.
Yeah.
And so I think I've mentioned this as we've talked back and forth over the last couple of weeks is my biggest fear is that this turns into a Matthew Stafford situation where this quarterback is just getting absolutely drilled and beat up.
Andrew Luck too. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they can't find him a head coach. And so there's all this turmoil. And then, so next thing you know, by the time your rebuild is like, all right, we need to rebuild, which is a big reason why this coaching hire is such a big deal, by the way. It's, he's 30 years old and really beat up, and you have to consider like, all right, let's let him go somewhere else and go try to win. That's probably my biggest fear with Justin Herbert. And then the other fear is if you don't hit on this coaching hire, and this is the big one. This is even worse than a rebuild. Is if you don't hit on this coaching hire,
which I think is why Jim Harbaugh is the guy, is because
right.
There could be other coaches that could succeed. Like Ben Johnson, I think is in my top
I love
3.
Ben Johnson.
I love Ben Johnson, but nobody can tell me that Ben Johnson has a better chance of succeeding than Jim Harbaugh with this team. Nobody. It's just
I could see why. I could see why somebody would pick Ben Johnson over Jim Harbaugh.
Totally.
I can see why. But if Justin Herbert was 23 or 24 and we were having this conversation and he was still on his rookie contract, I'd be like, all right, yeah, I'm going to go get Ben Johnson. But you're at a point where if you hire Ben Johnson and it doesn't work, and I'm not saying it won't, I'm pretty confident that Ben Johnson would work.
It's a risk.
I'm more comfortable with Jim Harbaugh, because if you mess up this next hire, you're talking about, we'll say another 4 years, 3-4 years. Cause I feel like you give Harbaugh the full 4 years.
Yeah.
Talking about 30-year-old Justin Herbert getting a different coach and not work.
Again. No, I'm with you. Yeah. I think I do think there's a couple comments here, which I'll get to, pointing to what I think this team should do. Zach Benson, though, $10 donation. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it. He says, I'd love to see Harbaugh and Pep Hamilton on this team next year. Happy birthday to the Bolt fans and players. We're going to get the best GIF for Christmas, or GIF, depending on which side of the joke you're on. Thoughts on Pep Hamilton?
I'd really love to be I need to hire a PI to follow Justin Herbert around and get some key pieces of information from him, because we're not going to get it ever at the podium. But
he's the most PC guy.
Yeah. I'm really interested in how much Pep actually had an impact on Justin Herbert. I don't buy that Justin Herbert's rookie season was his best season. I disagree with that, but it was a great season. And he did show some better things in that rookie season than he's shown since then. But overall, it wasn't his best season. Man, I would love to know just how influential Pep Hamilton was on his play in those first couple of years, because Pep hasn't stuck around. So I
don't know. It's a question. It's a question.
Yeah, it's the same conversations we have about Brian Callahan in the slot. It's man, I really want to know why he's not on a team right now.
Bryce Callahan,
Pep Hamilton is because Pep Hamilton seems like a great QB coach. If you look at it in the context of him with Justin Herbert, and I just feel and then him with Davis Mills, right? Didn't Davis Mills have it? Was it Davis Mills with the Texans in 2021?
I think it was, yeah.
That was a terrible. We're not going to talk about that Texans game.
No.
But yeah, I love the thought of Pep Hamilton coming back. I just, that was one of Herbert's. Obviously, Herbert's comfortable with him. Herbert had a great rookie season under him. And, if you get Pep Hamilton mixed with Jim Harbaugh, who is great with quarterbacks, phenomenal with quarterbacks. I mean, we're talking about McCarthy as a first-round pick, potentially. I don't know if that actually happens or not, but people have talked about it, which if you told me that last year, 2 years ago, I'd have been like, you're on something. But he's turned him around. So obviously there's, he proves it yet again that he's this QB whisperer. So yeah, get me Jim Harbaugh with Pep Hamilton. That's easy.
We're inching closer and closer. There's a bunch of comments in here about possible draft choices, draft strategy, all that kind of stuff. So let's pivot a little bit into some of these comments related to the draft.
All right.
Joseph
December 23rd.
DiMartini. Joseph DiMartini asks, how do you guys feel about the Chargers trading back in the draft, depending where they finish?
So right now they're at 8, right?
Yep.
So
most likely they could probably get to 6. There's a couple teams ahead of them that could probably lose. I don't see the Chargers winning another game.
We were having a conversation actually yesterday about I would take a certain player at like 12 to 14, but not at 8.
Yep.
So maybe. Listen, I would argue their biggest need in the draft right now, the thing they absolutely need to take in the draft early, if it's not round 1, it's round 2, or trade back into the first round to do it, is corner. And so I think given where the corners are and how many great edges there are, I would say there's 3 edges that I would say are probably top 12 picks. And then the receivers are going to be top 12 picks. And, you got 3 quarterbacks that could go early, maybe more. You could trade back and still get, a Nate Wiggins, or maybe McKinstry falls to like 12, 13, 14.
I agree.
So, yeah, especially when you're bringing in a new coach, go get more selections.
Yeah, I think I said this a few times. I think the Chargers have more roster holes than they do draft picks, which leads me to think that they either need to trade back, or you're going to see a ton of UDFAs brought in, kind of like what we saw with the Rams last season. We're going to have a lot of younger guys, a lot of guys come in that were not drafted simply because they have holes to fill in the roster. In terms of specifics, so there's a lot of talk in here about Brock Bowers, which
right, you got to think of who you're missing out on if you trade back. Is you're probably missing out at 8. I think Malik Neighbors is already gone. Shoot, Brock Bowers might already be gone.
I think at 8, Neighbors and Bowers, you may have one.
Yeah, you might get one of them. Depending on how people feel about Laiatu Latu as well. Like, how is his health?
Sick.
Yeah. Latu is unbelievable. Dallas Turner as well. I could see him going. I could see him going real quick. I know a lot of people have him as the edge one.
Which one? Dallas Turner?
Yeah. Did I said his name right?
Yeah.
Guessing. Okay.
Right, yeah.
Who a lot of people have him as their edge one. And if you're an edge one, you're going to be a top 10 pick. So
here's my thing. There's a comment in here about needing to give Justin Herbert as many weapons as possible, give him the best chance, give him the best offense to succeed in order for this team to win. And while I believe that, I'm big on the need for corner this year. Again, they got nothing right now at corner next year. That's proven, at least. Other than, if you want to say Asante Samuel Jr. is proven.
I want to say it. I want to say it. I love Asante.
I do too.
I think Asante has gotten a bad rap this year because he can't, he's struggled with tackling.
But
when has he not? Yes. When has he not struggled with tackling? I still like Asante for what he does well.
Yes, agreed. But I'm telling you, man, I am so bullish on Malik Neighbors for this team. If he's there, I don't think there's another player in the draft that I'm picking over him.
Well, given that Marvin Harrison's not there.
Yeah, given Marvin Harrison's not there. But even then, I love, obviously, he's a generational player. Generational.
Right, well,
hold on.
Now we're having a conversation.
Yes, but I think for Justin I'm taking Marvin Harrison Jr. too. But the one who I think is more explosive, that gives him, being Justin Herbert, the most added feature functionality that he has not had yet on this team, I think it's him. I think Malik Neighbors is as close as you can get to the Jamar Chase type, the bona fide alpha wide receiver that this team needs or that doesn't have, and that Justin Herbert would cook with, Malik Neighbors is the guy for me. And Brock Bowers is probably in the top 3 of guys I would select, but I think Neighbors is firmly in that position for me.
I'm not gonna pick a top 3 like who I want quite yet. I mean, sure, why not? If I had to say there were like,
we're going. There you go. He's
go.
back.
If I had to pick 3 right now, it'd be between assuming Harrison Jr. is gone, Neighbors, Alt, and McKinstry. Maybe Latu as well.
Ooh. Jake, you came at a great time. We're talking. Someone asked about draft picks, draft selections, trading up versus staying put.
I was going to say, first of all, apologies. I had to jump off there temporarily. Had to take care of something. If this draft talk has been going on for 15 minutes, very fitting that I wasn't here for it. So I appreciate whoever decided to start this conversation. But so let's get back to it. So I'm sorry. What's the question?
The question was, someone asked about trading back versus staying put and what that matter, like what that means. But then it got into what we think this team needs most. Jason said corner for very good reason. I put Malik Neighbors. I'm putting my flag on the ground for that one. And then we were kind of talking about top 3. So Jake, for you right now, let's just say in a world they stay put.
You know how much I want this team to turn down.
I know. We'll do 2 scenarios. Scenario 1, they stay put. Who are your top 3?
Okay.
Scenario 2, they trade back to mid-late first round. Who would you pick then? So scenario 1, go.
It makes Jay's gone. You can't take Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, obviously. Anybody who's saying that he's going to drop because of the quarterbacks in this class, that's not happening. So
it's like top 3.
I appreciate everybody's. Yes, I appreciate all the love for Marvin Harrison Jr. and it's totally valid, but unfortunately, it's just not happening. For me, Dan, it's still, even though it still may seem a little bit rich, you could make a case for Brock Bowers being in there. Malik Neighbors obviously is a yes as far as a playmaker that's there. Again, I would expect if what takes place today and tomorrow, if the Jets do their job and Chicago does their job, the Chargers could actually find themselves sitting pretty at 6 by the time the season ends. I'm with Jason on Joe Alt from the standpoint of that's a rock solid bookend to Rashawn Slater. I get it. But you have so many holes on this roster and what you have to fill next year. You literally could go BPA in a variety of different ways. As far as corner goes, at 6, considering who might still be on the board, it might be even a little bit rich. And that's strange enough for me to say, even though I know that corner is without doubt a need. I think
all the corners are on the board at 6.
Which I would agree with. I think just may be for who may still be on the board by the time 6 rolls around. It may just be a little bit too rich for corners. So corner is definitely something I could see for a trade back possibility. Third possible option that you put in there at 6.
I think this is an easy one.
Well, let's hear it, Dan.
I think it's the UCLA kid.
Latu? Yeah.
I would do
even if you're at 6, Dallas Turner could be that guy.
Yeah.
So depending, Latu still has health questions, I think, but I feel like you could easily go Latu or Turner, pair him next to Thule. For me, it's just I threw Alt in there instead of Bowers. I know a lot of people he needs his Antonio Gates or he needs
Shout out to Alan Silva for the $5 donation. Herbert needs his Gates with 1, 2, 3 exclamation points.
3. Wow.
By the way, when was Gates drafted?
He wasn't drafted. That's a trick question.
Bam.
Bingo. How many first round tight ends have been bona fide superstars?
I saw a list of this.
It's a short list if that's the point you're trying to make.
Was it Hawkinson a first round pick?
Yep, he was.
And Njoku looks good, but he hasn't lived up to. I don't think he's lived up to.
It's a short list if that's the point you're trying to make.
And again, remember how much praise that what the heck is the Atlanta kid?
Pitts.
Tight end from Atlanta.
Yeah,
Kyle
Kyle Pitts.
Now, granted, I think there's some robbery in terms of how he's being utilized, but like
He's still a phenomenal player. Like when he touches the ball, he's the best player on the field.
which is kind of wild how he doesn't touch the ball enough. But
other than Bijan now I think Bijan's a better player than him now. But like when he has the ball in his hands, it's a different Atlanta's a different team when he gets the ball.
Forgotten LOL cow. Lol cow? Do you guys think we'll lose out? 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Jason's face. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a fun discussion. What something that Jake and I, and now Jason, we've had some of these discussions recently about like draft strategy and like what you should go after and why you go after it. And I don't necessarily know if this is right, but for me, because you see all these like, oh, you need a center, you need an edge, corner, tight end, wide receiver, also running back, by the way. They can also go tackle. Like there's so many. Safety.
Linebacker. We were just talking about how all the linebackers are going to be gone.
Alohi Gilman's a free agent. You got JT Woods and Derwin. That's your safety tandem right now. So the way I look at it is I look at this season and I think, okay, what was the area that this team, if you made it from a weakness to a strength, would bring the biggest improvement? Like what position group?
Biggest improvement to the team or biggest improvement to the position group?
To the team. Like what would impact what would impact the team's success the most?
O-line. Oh, the team's success the most. O-line. I personally think it's O-line. I know I said corner earlier is probably their biggest need in terms of like which position needs it most, because I don't think Michael Davis is going to even be on the team next year.
I agree. Free agent.
And, Asante is really the only like starting caliber corner they have. And I say that when I mean starting caliber, like you can't go into next season with any of these guys starting outside of Asante Samuel at all. And Asante Samuel should not be your cornerback one either. Like you need, ideally you're getting 2 players better than Asante Samuel in this next offseason.
Yeah.
But Justin Herbert's hurt for the rest of the year. And you think that's the lines issue? You don't think that's a blocking tight end, blocking running back issue? I'm not saying it's the lines issue. And I think I've been very, very like transparent on Twitter that it's not due to an O-line, like a lack of talent on the O-line. I think it very much is protection plan. I think, like, say what you will about Joe Lombardi, but he went into each week with a really good protection plan in place. And listen, I'm not advocating for Joe Lombardi right now, but when you walk into a week and you have like the Broncos game where it's just free rushers whenever they want, literally whenever. If they want to send dudes on first down, it's a free rusher. If they want to send somebody on third down, free rusher. That's ridiculous. I don't think it's a lack of talent, but at the same time, you don't get worse at that by drafting an O-line. You can only get better if you draft Joe Alt.
I agree. But my point is, I don't think bringing in Joe Alt raises the level of the offensive line play, because you mentioned like scheme was an issue. You mentioned like tight end blocking, running back issues, all that kind of stuff leads to it.
And maybe drafting Brock Bowers is enough to help. Maybe you put him next to Trey Pipkins and that he can get some mean chip blocks in there.
Enough. Yeah.
I think Gerald Everett has been an underrated blocker this year. So if you put Brock Bowers and Gerald Everett on the field together, I think that's a good duo to have in terms of blocking on the tight end position.
Blocking has absolutely been an issue for this Chargers team. Like there's zero question about that.
All around.
It's
receiver blocking, running back blocking, just tight end blocking. I think the O-line has actually blocked like acceptably when they get man on man, like man to man, they can block. Like there's no question about that. If you put Zion has blocked Chris Jones this season and has been successful doing so. Like he loses his reps 100%. Every lineman is going to lose reps. The issue is if you lose a rep over here, where's my fist? Over here, and this free rusher over here is also coming. You can't afford to lose this rep. I'm not doing that with my fist. You can't afford to lose this rep if this guy over here is free. I'm having trouble right now. I'm taking my hands and taking them out of here. They're behind my back.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yeah, but you can't afford to lose a rep man to man if there's a free rusher. if you are man to man and everybody has their guy, you can afford to lose a rep because your quarterback can work with that.
And
Even
Jake, you
guys,
and Jake, you and I talked about this. Like blocking is an issue, but I think fans, the team, need to be specific and understand, like recognize what part of the blocking is the issue and what part can be resolved via draft capital and where to draft it.
And that's the bigger point, Dan. This is where it gets a little bit dicey because, yes, just talking about this now and projecting an offensive line that would have Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt on the bookends of it sounds fantastic. However, I'm merely looking at the nickels and dimes of this because what do you do with Trey Pipkins? Now, I'm not saying that everybody in the chat's going to just go berserk and say, "Oh, cut him. It's done. It's done."
You can trade him. He started on the O line. He's progressed to a point where he can start on an O line.
I'd be interested to know what the trade value would be if the Chargers were to cut him prior to next June. It would be 9.5 against the cap because of the new contract that he signed last year. Also from a team that's already so far in the red. Now, I'm not discounting it. I'm not saying that it's not smart to do that because I'm not discrediting anything from the talent that Joe Alt has. But in terms of, to Dan's point, what is it to build out this roster? Yeah, obviously you have to get a center for this team. Does that necessarily come in round one, however? No, it doesn't.
It's bad practice to draft centers in round and like where they're picking. No, you'd have to trade way back. You're not talking about trading back. You're talking like landslide, like
not picking in the first round.
Correct.
Yeah,
possibly.
You're talking like you have the 31st or 32nd pick. Then we're talking drafting. Unless that dude is like Quentin Nelson of centers, then
yeah,
sure. But even then, it's like, man, it's hard because center is. I'm not gonna say like on the O line it stands out the least. My words don't say that. Jason Kelsey's words do, but my words don't say that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that Jason Kelsey has said that you can put the worst O lineman at center. But no, I'm not going to go that far. I think that's too early, man.
So here's the thing, like, and chicken or the egg. There's a lot of these types of discussions to be had about like what's causing some of these issues. Like you can say, okay, well, the offensive line or the blocking in general like has struggled, but that's because the receivers aren't getting open. There's nobody that can actually separate on this team. Like there is that argument to be had.
I've seen Davis get open a couple times on the wheel.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know, I can't remember if it was the Bears or Jets game.
On the right side.
Davis got wide open on a wheel route. And you can argue that it wasn't his number one read, whatever. He beat that corner so bad.
But he'll beat every corner. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like
he flew by that corner and there was no safety back there to help. The safety was on the other side. And the other safety shot in to cover Keenan Allen.
But but the issue is like, okay, so you could say maybe he doesn't have enough weapons on the outside that are reliable or that can separate because Keenan's been out, Mike Williams is out, Josh Palmer was out. Like there's that discussion, which I would probably push back a little bit, but there's that discussion. Then there's a discussion, there's comments in here about like this team would benefit the most with having a running game, which if a team could have some resemblance of a running game, it would force the defense to kind of, be more balanced, which in theory is true, but you need someone to block in order to do that. And that hasn't happened. And I would say that's equally part running back issue. No, it's more blocking on the edges issue, in my opinion. So chicken or the egg, like I try to look at like, what is the source of this and how can you fix that? Like a force multiplier, if you will. Like
there are other ways to back a defense off than running the ball. The best game we saw it in was the Minnesota Vikings game. If you guys ever want to watch a clinic offensively, highly encourage you guys to go watch the Vikings game again, because they couldn't run the ball and they figured it out early. And so they just started throwing sideline to sideline.
Yep.
And they just started throwing horizontally and they threw screens left and right. They were running RPOs. And what that does is it forces your edge to widen. It forces your linebackers to widen. It forces your safeties to come down, and it forces your corners to be more proactive against the screens and against the smokes and against the bubbles. So everybody is drawn in, and then they just started, Keenan Allen just on the intermediate routes just started tearing it up, and absolute clinic by the Chargers. I don't know why they haven't brought that game plan back, like specifically against the Broncos, when the Broncos were making their life hell on the blitzes. Like, you got to throw some screens, but that's a whole nother conversation. Yeah, I mean, a run game does help. It does. Like, there's no way around it. Being able to get 5 yards on first down is extremely helpful for the passing game, to be able to go and run. Hey, let's just throw a quick smoke round at Keenan Allen. Maybe he gets 4 yards, or let's go, it's 2nd and 5. Let's throw play action because we're already ahead of the sticks. Let's just send it and see what happens. And right now we're talking like 2nd and 9, 2nd and 11, and
2nd and 8 at best. Mostly.
Yeah. And it's just, so a run game does help, but I also think having a coach who's aware that his run game is not good right now. And I'm actually, which is why I'm very curious about these next couple of games, because we always heard Brandon Staley talk about the marriage between the run and pass.
Tough and rugged football team and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we always talked about Anthony Lynn. I want to run it more. We always saw Mike McCoy with the QB draw, and I'm really curious to see with the new mentality at coaching, if we see Kellen Moore get away from those first down runs a little bit more, if we see a little bit more sideline to sideline action on the screens and bubbles. But yeah, I guess we'll see today. Some people will see today. Some people won't care.
Yeah. Jake, for you, like, whether it's the draft, whether it's free agency, what is the single biggest thing that this Chargers team, personnel-wise, needs to do?
That's a unfair question, Dan, because when you put it in singularities like that, there is no single thing that this Chargers team has to do in order to get better. In my opinion, there are many things to do, but I'm saying, like, what is kind of the trickle down effect, or what is kind of like the one thing that if they do this, okay,
it unlocks so many whatever things.
If you're putting it now, see, if you were to say, like, organizationally, obviously it's what head coach GM pairing is going to put Justin Herbert in a position to succeed for the next 5 years. If you're putting it from a personnel standpoint, I would say you probably have to, and again, this is me thinking with the mentality that they're going to bring in an offensive mind for the next head coach. You got to give Justin Herbert either better protection or it's better weapons that you have to give him. Again, we could conceivably be talking about just a few months from now, a roster that, and I know some people would say it's not going to happen and that it shouldn't happen, but there is still a potential that Mike Williams and Keenan Allen may not be on this roster to start next year. Just think about that. Just think about that for a second. Not to say that I'm not asking for it. Obviously, I'm not asking for it. Keenan Allen should obviously stay out of all of those big 4 restructures that took place.
I think Keenan Allen gets extended, but
right, which I'm there. But still, even if you think about that for a second, so your starting wide receiver room for next year is Keenan Allen, Joshua Palmer, Quentin Johnston, Darius Davis, whoever your wide receiver 5 ends up being. It's not the best. It's not pretty. You're banking on essentially a good year of development for Quentin Johnston, which is still a question mark up until the air right now.
He's gotten better though.
He has gotten better. Obviously, hey, once
Chargers fans that
once the stick shift entered the offense, all of a sudden it's like, hey, they start going downfield. They start using him in ways where he succeeds. But you look at that tight end spot, you look at the running back spot, what's going to be able to create this offense and giving it more balance, something to take the weight off of Justin Herbert or to make his job easier when it comes
very
to
underrated
spreading a deal. Yes.
Because you need a running back that can also block for Herbert, which
they don't got one.
Even Eckler's taken a step back in that regard this year.
Correct.
So it's like,
we saw when he was not on the field after week 1, how much the pass blocking suffered. And then when he came back, it didn't actually get much better, unfortunately. So yeah, that would probably be, if you were to put it in one kind of multifaceted singular answer, Dan, that would probably be it. How are you going to find a way to benefit Justin Herbert from a personnel standpoint?
I like to defer that question to Jim Harbaugh.
Smart. Yeah, maybe send him a birthday message, but have it be more of like a question. Like, happy birthday! How would you? Yeah. We're wrapping up. Probably another like 5 minutes or so here. I think this has been interesting. There's been so many questions about the draft and about head coaching and personnel and all that stuff. Like, I think it's impressive to see. And I think it's telling that 3 weeks into the season, like Chargers fans for the most part are already like draft mode, but are already so gung-ho about who they want to be steering the ship. And I think in years past, you look at head coaching back when, Brandon Staley was hired, there were a few guys, and I think Chargers fans generally were pretty split with who this team wanted. I would say
Staley. I know a lot of people wanted what was the more veteran?
Dable was the one that most people were saying like, oh, he'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
But look what
I thought everybody was pounding the table for Jason Garrett. What are we talking about here?
Jason Garrett, Urban Meyer.
Yep. Yeah. So Lassa Bruin says there's no home run weapon where he can just hand it off and they can go for 50 yards. And I would argue there's no home run weapon, period.
There's not a lot of teams that do have that, though. But I would argue like that's.
I mean, that's a fair answer. Yeah,
I push back. I push back on that. There are I see so many teams or so many games, and it feels like it never happens with the Chargers. Like you saw busted coverage with Josh Palmer this last week, where he just it was an easy touchdown, long gain. But there are so many teams that have players that you can throw a slant route to, or that they have blocking in place and they have an A-chain, if you will, or they can take a easy throw. I call it easy touch to the house. Like Christian Kirk does it for Jacksonville. I remember seeing it early in this year. I'm like, I have never seen a Chargers player do that or at least a receiver specifically. This doesn't happen. You look at what Jamar Chase does. Justin Jefferson does it. You look at AJ Brown does it. You look at Dolphins, they got 3 guys that can do it. 4 guys that can do it, honestly. There are teams that do it. Like Kelsey does it all the time, especially against the Chargers.
Yeah, I feel like this issue stems from you watching the Chargers. So you just immediately think everybody is running for 60-yard touchdowns because you're watching everybody do it against the Chargers.
Well, a lot of these I'm not watching it against the Chargers, but also against the Chargers too. But even if it's 8 to 10 teams that do it, the Chargers should be one when you have Justin Herbert, I guess is my point.
I think they have. Quentin Johnston can do that. Like he could.
Which is so frustrating that he has not been given an opportunity to. And that's and I hope. So that's going to be my last question for both of you. And folks in the comments chat, let us know what you think. But what, not necessarily player-wise, but what is the most to glean from, or what you can take into 2024 with these next 3 games? I'm not saying is Isaiah Spiller the guy? But what can this team try these next 3 weeks that can impact the team's future the most?
Isaiah Spiller's not going to be the guy, regardless of how he plays these last 3 weeks. It doesn't matter if he goes off for 100 yards a game these last 3 weeks. They need running back somewhere. Somehow they free agency. Now going into this offseason, going into next season, maybe he develops even more and he can be the guy, but not based on these last 3 games. These last 3 games are to give Isaiah Spiller a chance to be the guy
to be on the team
in the future. In the future. But man, what can you take the most from these last 3 games? I don't know, because I don't know if Henley's going to play. I don't know how much Spiller is going to play. I don't know. Quentin Johnston, probably. Quentin Johnston, if you what kind of touches is he going to get? Are you going to get him? Are you going to keep throwing these intermediate routes with him, where he has to run very nuanced routes in the intermediate? Because that's not his game at all. He still needs to develop routes a lot. I would say develop. Do I have to pick one player? Or can I just say develop all the young guys?
It doesn't have to be a player. I'm not even saying player. My answer isn't a player, but you can do player if you want.
I would also say Kellen Moore's a big one. How does Kellen Moore look? Because I know there's a chance, even if Harbaugh comes through, that Moore is still the offensive coordinator. Because I think Justin Herbert's going to get a little bit of say. At least he should get a little bit of say in Kellen Moore. Like there's a chance, they go get Dan Quinn and Kellen Moore's still the OC. There's whatever head coach they bring into here, whatever GM they bring into here, they're going to have the chance to look at Kellen Moore's body of work and say, do we still want him working with Justin Herbert? And so I would say Kellen Moore and his usage with Isaiah Spiller, Quentin Johnston, and the overall protection plan. How does it look in these last 3 games?
Jake,
different mind. Mine's a little bit more just open-ended, but it still falls in line to what Jason was saying. It's find out who is going to be the depth of your roster next year. You could essentially say that, okay, jobs are up for grabs here at every single position with the exception of quarterback, of course. Who is it that's going to come into here in 2024 and be able to provide key depth? Because your front office has not been able to draft key depth over the last 11 years. And it has failed you tremendously. So they haven't
been able to retain key depth is where
draft, to be honest. Yes. Yes. Signing 4 second-year contracts to players that were drafted in rounds 2 through 7 is atrocious team building.
Wait, what?
Since Tom Telesco's tenure.
In rounds 2 through 7, only 4 players have seen second contracts. Yeah.
And I think it's like Keenan Allen's one of those. Like that's like,
yeah, it's not too good.
And all the contracts are like beefy contracts, like
right,
insane.
Right. So I would want to see who's going to be able to provide key depth next year, because you have to essentially reload at almost what of the 22 spots, both offensively, defensively, that you have on this roster. You could probably say that 3/4 of them.
I mean, you could go down the list and say all of them. I would say each one, like quarterback, they probably need a better backup quarterback. Yeah. Running back, they need the whole running back room. Like that's a whole topic. You can cover an entire episode on that. Is like you go down the list and say
we need to get better. We have a series of position groups and why they all need help.
Right.
And is there a position?
No, Dicker's job is on for draft. Exclusive, restricted free agent. He'll get paid pennies and make kicks. That's how it works.
Like,
ours is kind of like when you don't mention the player that it's like good news. Like we've hardly mentioned Cameron Dicker on this show this year, but for the best reasons possible, for the fact that
especially a kicker. Yes, especially a kicker. If you have to start mentioning kickers, you're in trouble.
Right. We don't need to circle back to what it used to be on this show 2 or 3 years ago when the Chargers had.
We're experts on
damn turnstile for kicking.
We know. No, I think so. For me, as you kind of wrap this up, I think for me, like what I'm looking for these next 3 games is. One of the things that's been frustrating this season has been, it seems like, and both offensively and defensively, players, people, the coaching has said that they do this, but when you watch the game film, players don't seem like they're put in positions that they are comfortable with to succeed in. And I'm hoping, and you heard Gift Smith talk about this, and you heard Derek Ainsley talk about this. What I'm hoping these next 3 weeks is they look at the personnel that they have and they find a way to scheme them up for opportunities that they know that they can do best with. Like, what can Darius Davis do? And what should he do? Like, what is Quentin Johnston best at? What is Isaiah Spiller best at? Like, what is Gerald Everett best at?
Is Derwin James put back into a comfortable spot?
I'm just talking offense. We can go back to defense too. Like the corners have been horrible this year. Is that because the corners suck? It could be some of it, but could it be because they've been asked to do things that are overly complex that they aren't good at? Also could be the case. And it probably is definitely part of the case. You can go up and down the roster. That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping this coaching staff gives these players opportunities to shine, to develop, to do things that they're good at, to gain confidence, to get production, to get reps. Like, give me that. If Gift Smith and company could just give me that, tell us who our players are on this roster. Like, who are they actually versus who have you tried to make them?
I would be really curious, since you mentioned, like, are the corners bad or is it just too complex? I'd be really curious to ask Chargers fans based on what we've seen, because we've had we've had one side and the very opposite side, too complex and too simple. I would almost ask, like, who did they prefer, like, after watching 3 years of Brandon Staley and watching Gus Bradley for however many years? Did they prefer the overly simple and would get diced up underneath by these check down routes, but the players were playing fast, or overly complex and these players are just getting burned, but occasionally, you're throwing blitzes and getting home, and you're covering underneath, you're just dying everywhere else.
The first year that Dan and I did this show was the final year of Gus Bradley's tenure with this team as a defensive coordinator. And I remember how frustrated it was to come on here and talk about how much the defense was suffering in 2020. Yeah. Hindsight being 2020, however, appropriately.
Oh boy.
I would probably have to say I would have preferred Gus Bradley's defense
I think it's fair to say Gus Bradley's defense played better with this personnel.
What's weird about that, Jason, is I always thought that, and you even heard like Kyle Van Noy talk about it on his little clip that came out on social media yesterday, how he said that Staley's defense required, a number one shutdown corner. I truly believe that Gus Bradley's scheme required Derwin James to be himself in that particular system in order to succeed. Because when the years came where he went down or he was injured or he wasn't playing, that defense absolutely crumbled. So I think both defenses.
They went back and re-signed Jaleel Adai. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, let go of Rayshawn Jenkins.
Yeah, how did that go? So in certain circumstances, they both relied on certain things that they probably shouldn't have. But schematically wise, I think if you were to draw it up to say, okay, pros, cons, which ones put the most players in the better positions to succeed, I would probably have to say it's Gus Bradley.
So
that's a big conversation down the road.
Yes. Pivotal matchup this evening. Bills, Chargers playing for their playoff lives.
Are they still?
I think they're still. No, technically they are not eliminated.
Bills are.
I'm kidding.
Let's go stick.
Yes.
All right.
But
we're still in this.
We're at the time of the season where you're looking at how this team can show you what they can do for next year, both personnel, leadership, GM, coach, vision, like you name it. And look, we'll be with you every step of the way. Again, Jason, welcome to Chargers Unleashed permanently. Best of luck to you with Blueprints. I can't wait to see what you do with it. I think your first episode is going to be next week.
Super stoked. It's going to be about how Easton Stick beat Josh Allen and all the rational takes following.
We'll get 6 views.
I like how he says the rational takes.
I can't wait for Easton Stick to beat Josh Allen and to see all the very calm-headed, rational takes on Twitter afterwards.
Oh, can't wait. But realistically, what is it going to be about?
It's going to be about Ben Johnson and Kellen Moore and what they do similarly, and kind of makes that case for Ben Johnson, because I know a lot of people are completely out on it. Just making it known because I've seen this. Jim Harbaugh here. Ben Johnson.
You have to keep saying it. saying it.
First sentence has to be Harbaugh's first, and then you can say whatever you want.
Jim Harbaugh.
I think that we should just have like a running ticker notification now on the board. Like, once again, announcement. It's Jim Harbaugh.
It's my number one.
Yes.
by quite a bit. But it is going to be about how Keenan Allen and Amon-Ra St. Brown were used similarly in their schemes, and what Ben Johnson would bring to the table for Justin Herbert. A lot.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Sorry, Jason, keep going.
A lot of just a lot of leverage, a lot of diagnosing leverage, a lot of creating leverage, a lot of isolating, a lot of movement pre-snap to get these guys opportunities to get the ball and to make the job easier on the quarterback. And anytime you can do that with an elite quarterback, let alone with a good quarterback like Jared Goff, Ben Johnson creating opportunities for an elite quarterback it's super enticing. And so I'm going to show a few plays this week that kind of compare Keenan Allen's usage to Amon-Ra St. Brown's usage, and we'll go from there.
This will be a great dive into, because Dan and I have not obviously done our head coach rankings yet. And for those of you who are done with the first time head coaching scenario for this team to move forward with, I would invite you to watch this episode from Jason from the standpoint that, look, there is no one winning formula to this. It's going to be a bigger picture that Dan and I will get into as it relates to how you should go about finding your next head coach. But I think this is a great segment from the standpoint of where this team is at right now, where it's going to be going over the next couple of weeks, especially with head coaching interviews. So definitely looking forward to that.
Yes, Jason, welcome to the team. Chargers fans, you're in for a treat as we go on this ride with Jason and the rest of you for the rest of 2023 and 2024 and beyond. Shout out to all of the Bolt fam. Again, if you hit the like and subscribe, it helps out a ton. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everybody. Thank you to everyone who's taken part in this and to taking part in all of the things that we've been doing since the beginning. We say it all the time, but we can't do it without you. And now, Jason, you're part of the fam. So welcome and looking forward to the future with you and the rest of the Chargers fans. Until then, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, best of luck for the rest of 2024. Hopefully the Chargers can pull this thing out with hopefully number 6 pick by the end of the season. And we'll be talking about draft picks, GM, head coaching candidates, and everything in between along the way. Until then, we'll talk to you next time on the next Chargers Unleashed.